Rain fell like needles, sharp and fast, hissing into the boiling swamp below. The sky was dark green with lightning slashing between clouds. Somewhere above, gunships screamed across the horizon. Then silence, thick and wrong, settled over the jungle like a warning. Corporal Dean Riker had never seen a planet like Maresha 9. It was alive, angry, and always wet. His unit had been ambushed while scouting a path for evacuation. Now they were gone, burned, drowned, or swallowed whole. Only Riker remained, crawling through the mud with a broken transmitter and a backpack full of useless rations. The trees were wide as towers. Roots twisted over the water like the bones of giants. The air smelled of rot and fire. Riker kept moving, not because he had a plan, but because stillness meant death. He wasn't sure which was worse, the swamp, or the creatures that moved in it without sound. Then he saw it. A small yellow life raft drifting near a fallen log. Its edges were chewed, but it floated. He sloshed through waist-high water and grabbed its edge. As he pulled himself in, something moved inside. It was a girl, not human. Blue-skinned, glowing faintly, wearing leaves and waterweeds like a dress. Her white hair clung to her shoulders. Eyes wide, fearful, wounded, she tried to speak, but her voice cracked like stone. Riker froze. He'd heard of the swampkin primitive aliens, dangerous, territorial. The brass warned them to shoot on sight. But this girl didn't look dangerous. She looked like she had been running too. Her left arm was scratched, her ankle swollen. She was just a passenger on a sinking world. She flinched when Riker moved, but he held up both hands. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. The girl blinked, then touched her chest and said a name he couldn't understand. Then she pointed at him. "Riker," he said. "Human, soldier." She tilted her head. A small nod. She understood. Something, enough. For the next hour, they floated silently. The raft rocked as strange cries echoed from deep inside the trees. Once, something huge brushed beneath them, causing the girl to grip Riker's arm tightly. Her hand was warm. 2. Warm? Fever? Poison? Or fear? He didn't know, but he didn't push her away. She spoke again, slowly, in a language he didn't know. But then she stopped and drew in the air shapes, signs, symbols. Riker didn't understand, but she kept trying. She needed him. To see something. Something urgent. He looked down. Her hands had drawn a circle with jagged lines all around it. Inside the circle was a smaller mark of human stick figure. Then she pointed at the jungle behind them, then at the sky. Then to the water. Riker got it. They were surrounded. She wasn't warning him about her kind. She was warning him about everything else. The swamp wasn't just a danger, it was hunting. Them both. He checked his pack, a flare gun, 2 med packs. A knife, no food. No way to call out. His eyes met hers again. She wasn't just some lost girl. She knew these swamps. She knew what came next. And without her, he wouldn't last a night. He pointed at her, then made a walking motion with his fingers. Then to the raft's edge. "Help me get out of here," he said. She paused, then nodded again. The rain eased. Steam rose from the water like ghosts. Insects buzzed, and in the distance, something screamed. Not like a beast. Like metal being crushed. The girl shivered, then reached under a loose board in the raft, and pulled out a small blade made of glowing bone. Riker didn't know where they were going. But he knew one thing. He was no longer alone in this hell. And she was more than just an alien beauty. She might be his only way out. The raft drifted between thick roots that rose like towers. Vines hung low, brushing their heads. The blue-skinned girl moved with purpose now, pointing toward the deeper part of the swamp. Her glowing blade stayed in her lap, humming softly. Riker didn't speak. He watched her face instead. She was alert, eyes darting at every ripple and rustle. Her hair had dried in the breeze, now flowing over her shoulders like silver threads. He still didn't know her name, but he trusted her more than his map. Once, they passed a broken drone half submerged in green muck. Its lights flickered and sparks danced around its ruined body. Riker reached to grab it, but the girl slapped his wrist sharply. She pointed to the water. Something was moving beneath the surface. A dark fin, long and smooth, sliced through the murky liquid and vanished again. Riker's stomach twisted. That thing hadn't made a sound, and it had been circling them for minutes without him noticing. She whispered a single word. Vreelik. Her tone was cold, fearful, like that name was death itself. He sat back quickly, eyes scanning the water. No movement now. The raft bobbed slowly. Stillness returned, but it felt heavier than before. They continued for hours. Sometimes she guided them with her hands, paddling quietly through fallen trees and tangled roots. Other times, she would stop, listen, and wait before moving forward. It was as if she could feel the swamp breathing. Riker noticed her wincing as she moved her swollen ankle. The leaf wrap around it was soaked in dark red. Infection was setting in. He reached into his pack, took out the med pack, and opened it. Gently, the girl froze. He raised his palms and moved slowly. It's medicine, he said. For your leg. She didn't move. But when he reached down and touched the wound, she hissed and grabbed his wrist. Then, something changed in her eyes. She looked into his face, studying him. And slowly, she let go. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic and wrapped it tight with gauze. She watched silently, her breathing slowed. She was in pain, but she didn't cry out. Not once. After he finished, she gave him a small nod. Not a thank you, something deeper. An understanding. The swamp grew darker. Mist curled around the trees. It was hard to tell if it was day or night anymore. Riker felt the weight of exhaustion pressing on him, but the girl remained alert. She tapped his arm and pointed again, this time upward. High above, hidden in the trees, were woven nests. Massive ones. Dozens of them. Some broken. Others still glowing with faint blue light. Riker stared up, mouth slightly open. You lived there, he whispered. She nodded slowly. Her home was destroyed. That's why she was alone. That's why she was running. The war hadn't just shattered human forces. It had torn through alien lives too. Riker wanted to ask what happened. Who attacked? Why? But they had no shared words. Only looks. Only silence and signals. And those told more than words ever could. They stopped under a wide rock ledge covered in moss. The girl motioned for them to rest there. Riker climbed out, pulling the raft half up on the shore. His boots squelched in the soft mud as he sat back against the stone. The girl sat beside him, curling her legs close. Fireflies drifted through the air like tiny stars. For a moment, it felt almost peaceful. Then the sound came. A sharp, clicking noise. Close, too close. Riker stood, knife in hand. The girl was already crouched low, her blade glowing bright. From the shadows, something stepped forward. Not animal, not human. Metal legs, sharp arms, red eyes glowing. A scout drone, but not theirs. It moved like it was hunting. Riker stepped in front of the girl and raised his knife. The drone scanned him. A red light passed over his face. Then, it clicked again. It had seen him, tagged him. The light pulsed 3 times. He lunged forward before it could react. His blade struck metal and sparks flew. The drone screeched. The girl joined him, her bone dagger slicing through wires with unnatural ease. In seconds, the drone fell silent. They breathed hard. The girl looked at Riker with new eyes now. Not just as a survivor, but as a fighter. An equal. He kicked the broken drone into the swamp. We're not safe here anymore, he said, even though he knew she couldn't understand. She still nodded. She knew too. Together, they pushed the raft back into the water. The girl climbed in first, then held out her hand to Riker. Her fingers were small but strong. He took it and stepped in. The swamp was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that comes just before the real storm. The raft moved faster now. The girl urged Riker to paddle alongside her. The water ahead glowed faintly green, filled with soft lights beneath the surface. Riker didn't ask what they were. He only kept paddling. The girl pointed toward a gap in the trees, where long vines swayed over still water. She whispered something under her breath. Riker didn't understand the words, but he caught the way she said them. Like a prayer, they entered a narrow channel, the world closing in around them. The sounds of the swamp grew quiet. No birds. Bugs. No wind. The trees leaned too close. The water was too still. Even the air felt wrong. Riker gripped his knife and kept his eyes wide. The girl pressed her fingers to the raft's edge. She was waiting for something, watching. Her body was still, but her muscles were tense. Then the water ahead rippled. Not like before. It moved in a wide circle, too perfect to be natural. The girl grabbed Riker's arm and pulled him low. She raised her blade slowly, pointing it toward the water. A massive shape rose beneath them. Scaled, long and thick like a serpent. Riker barely breathed. The creature didn't attack. It circled the raft once, then dipped below again, watching, testing. The girl placed her hand over her heart and began humming, a low, soft tune. The melody carried through the air like a windless whisper. The creature below paused, then slowly sank deeper into the swamp. Riker stared at her, stunned. "What was that?" he whispered. She didn't answer, only gave a small nod. She had calmed the beast, or warned it. He couldn't be sure. They kept moving. The girl pointed again, this time to a cluster of red-leaf trees rising in a spiral. "Raw neck," she said clearly. It was the first word Riker understood. "Raw neck," he repeated. She nodded again, then made a gesture, two hands together, then pulling apart. Riker guessed it meant separation or loss. They reached the spiral trees just as the sun broke through the clouds above. Rays of light pierced the mist, casting colors on the water like stained glass. Riker stopped paddling. Breath caught in his throat. Dozens of canoes, broken and half-sunk, drifted silently around the base of the trees. Ancient symbols were carved into their sides. Bones lay scattered across the banks. Not human bones, long skulls, slender ribs. "This was your village," he said quietly. The girl said nothing. She only stepped out of the raft, her bare feet sinking into the wet earth. Riker followed. She moved with reverence, brushing her fingers against each canoe she passed. Her eyes shimmered. She picked up a single carved pendant from the mud. It looked like a tooth, painted in glowing lines. She turned to Riker and held it out. A gift. A symbol. He took it slowly and bowed his head. She nodded once, then turned toward the largest tree. It had a wide opening near the base, a hollow chamber within. The girl motioned for him to follow. Inside it was dry, warm, lined with woven blankets and old weapons. This had been a shelter once. She knelt before a flat stone and pressed her hands to it. The stone lit up faintly. Riker realized it was a control panel, ancient, but still working. She tapped a sequence with practiced fingers. A map flickered to life in the air above the stone. The swamp from high above. Riker leaned closer. Dots glowed red. Drones, patrols, hostile forces. And a path, marked in blue, weaving through them all. She pointed to the blue path, then to herself, then to Riker. She was offering him a way out, but not just for him. For both of them. He looked at her for a long moment. She didn't owe him anything, yet she was giving him the only safe route through the swamp. He nodded slowly. Suddenly, a high-pitched screech tore through the air. The girl grabbed the pendant from around her neck and shoved it into Riker's hand. Then she pushed him toward the tree's exit. He turned just in time to see 3 scout drones gliding over the water, black, sleek, and fast. Their red lights flickered as they scanned the area. They were looking for them. Riker grabbed the girl's hand and ran. Back to the raft. They shoved it into the water and leapt in. The drones spotted them instantly. Red beams locked on. Sirens screamed. Laser bolts ripped through the trees, burning leaves and water alike. Riker ducked low and paddled hard. The girl reached into a hidden compartment beneath her seat and pulled out a curved device. She pressed it and hurled it into the air. It exploded in a burst of light, blinding the drones for a moment. One crashed into a tree. Another spun out, losing control. But the third kept coming. Riker gritted his teeth and stood up as it closed in. The drone aimed, too fast. He threw his knife just before it fired. The blade struck its sensor. The shot veered off, burning the water beside them. The drone spiraled, then crashed into the muck with a splash. Silence returned. Riker collapsed into the raft, breathing hard. The girl leaned beside him, equally exhausted. But alive, she looked at him and smiled faintly. A rare thing. Then pointed to the glowing map device still clutched in his hand. The path was still possible. But the real journey had only just begun. The raft moved quietly again, but the silence felt heavier now. The smoke from the crashed drones still lingered in the trees behind them. Riker held the map device tightly. It was cracked at the corner, but the blue path still glowed. The girl watched the skies more often now. Her eyes narrowed every time the wind shifted. She knew they had made too much noise. Others would come. Bigger ones. Stronger ones. They paddled harder. The water became darker, thicker, and choked with roots. Strange lights blinked under the surface. Sometimes faces stared back at them. Faces with too many eyes and teeth. Riker didn't speak. He was learning to follow the girl's signals. When she froze, he froze. When she paddled fast, he matched her rhythm. And when she looked at him with that quiet warning in her eyes, he prepared to fight. Their path led them through a tunnel of vines. It was dark inside, like floating through the throat of a beast. The girl touched the sides of the raft gently, muttering soft words to herself. Inside the tunnel, the air smelled like ash and honey. Faint blue fireflies floated around them. The raft glided forward without their help. It was as if something was pulling them in. At the other end of the tunnel, the swamp opened into a wide basin. A shallow lake surrounded by massive mushrooms, their caps glowing orange and red. Riker stared in awe. The colors reflected off the water, turning everything around them into a living painting. The girl looked relieved. She pointed to the far side of the lake, where stone steps led to a rocky platform. "Zarin," she said, tapping her chest. "Your people?" Riker asked. She shook her head, then pointed again. "Not people, something else. Something sacred." They crossed the lake slowly. The water here was calm, but beneath the surface, shadows moved. Not fast, but steady, watching, following. The girl ignored them. So Riker did too. At the stone steps, they dragged the raft ashore. The girl limped slightly, her ankle still healing. Riker offered her his arm. She hesitated, then accepted it. Together they climbed. At the top, a stone arch waited. Carvings lined its side, spirals, claws, suns, and eyes. Beneath the arch, a platform held a ring of standing stones. In the center stood a single black spire, humming softly. The girl approached it carefully. Her hand touched the spire's surface. Lines of light traced under her palm. The spire responded. With a pulse of blue energy, she turned to Riker and nodded. Then reached out and pressed the pendant against the spire. A deep sound echoed through the basin. Like the cry of a giant bird, The shadows beneath the lake stopped moving, then sank slowly out of sight. The girl sighed with relief. Riker stared at her, confused. She pointed to the spire, then to the map device in his hand. The spire had activated something. The device blinked. A new path opened. A shorter one. A safer one. Only accessible now. Riker understood. This place was a key. Without it, they would have wandered in circles until death took them both. Suddenly, a sharp blast echoed from the trees. Riker spun around, gun raised. The girl dropped low, blade ready. From the mist, 3 humanoid shapes emerged. Tall, armed. Armor painted with rust and black ink. Riker stepped in front of the girl. "Back off," he warned, though he knew they wouldn't understand. One of them laughed, a deep, cruel sound. He pointed his weapon at Riker and barked a command. Girl said something in her language. The leader turned to her and sneered. Then he raised his hand to strike her. Riker didn't wait. He charged. He tackled the leader into the mud, slamming his fist into the alien's jaw. The second soldier fired, but the shot missed. The girl hurled her bone dagger, hitting the shooter's arm. The third soldier lunged toward her. Riker grabbed a fallen spear and swung. It hit the soldier square in the chest. The armor cracked. The soldier fell. The leader struggled under Riker, but couldn't break free. Riker pressed the edge of the spear against his throat. The girl shouted. Riker froze. She pointed to the leader's belt, a glowing badge. She motioned for Riker to take it. He did. The device hummed once, then dimmed. She nodded. It was what she needed. They backed away slowly. The soldiers didn't follow. Riker and the girl climbed back into the raft. They pushed off the shore as more shadows appeared in the trees. None chased them. Not yet. The girl took the badge and pressed it against the map device. A final signal lit up, the way out. Beyond the poison river. Through the caves of fire. They had one path left. Riker looked at her. Her eyes were tired but focused. They had come too far to fail now. Whatever waited at the end of that path, they would face it together. The raft floated into a new part of the swamp where the air grew thick and smelled like burnt metal. The sky was hidden by smoke drifting from cracks in the rocks above. This place was no longer just wet and wild. It was wounded. Tall stone walls surrounded them, rising like broken teeth. Strange symbols were carved into the cliffs. Some glowed faint red, others pulsed softly. The girl watched them closely. She seemed nervous for the first time since they began. Riker kept one hand on his knife. The water here was slow, but it bubbled in places like it was boiling beneath the surface. Steam hissed from cracks around them. The raft rocked gently with each bubble. The girl pointed forward. There was a small tunnel ahead, just wide enough. For the raft, she whispered the word, Nekshara. Riker didn't know what it meant, but her voice was low and serious. He nodded once. They entered the tunnel. Heat pressed in from all sides. The rocks glowed faintly orange. Riker wiped sweat from his brow and looked back at the girl. Her skin shimmered under the glow, but her expression remained calm. The tunnel twisted like a snake. At every bend, Riker expected something to leap from the shadows. But the only sound was the soft drip of water and the hiss of steam. It felt like they were inside a sleeping beast. Then, without warning, the tunnel opened into a vast underground cavern. The ceiling arched high above, covered in glowing vines that pulsed with light. In the center was a wide platform of stone, and on it stood a large gate. It wasn't a door of wood or metal. It was energy. A glowing circle, held open by 4 black pillars. Symbols floated around it in the air. The girl stood up and stared at it. Her eyes widened with awe. She stepped off the raft and walked slowly to the gate. Riker followed, scanning the cavern. Something wasn't right. There were no sounds, no wind. No dripping. Just stillness. She stopped before the gate and turned to him. Her hands moved slowly. She gestured to the pendant he wore, the one she had given him earlier. Then to the badge they took from the soldier. Both were keys. Riker stepped forward and held the pendant toward one of the pillars. It responded with a low hum. The girl did the same with the badge. The symbols around the gate began to spin. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed through the cavern. Riker spun around. Shadows spilled from the far wall. Figures stepped out. Not drones, not soldiers. These were taller, armored in deep purple, faces hidden by smooth black masks. The girl shouted a word. Riker didn't know. Warning, despair, rage. She drew her bone blade and stepped in front of the gate. The figures raised their weapons. Riker fired first. His shot struck one of them in the shoulder, knocking it back. But the others kept moving. Fast, silent. Riker ducked and rolled to the side. The girl leapt forward, slashing with speed that stunned him. They fought together. She moved like lightning. He moved with weight and power. Each time one enemy fell, another took its place. The gate behind them hummed louder. The spinning symbols glowed blue. One of the masked figures grabbed Riker and threw him against a pillar. His head hit hard. Stars burst in his vision. He saw the girl surrounded, her blade knocked away. She was trying to reach him. He reached for the knife at his belt. Too slow. The masked warrior raised its weapon. Then a blast of light shot from the gate. It hit the warrior square in the chest. The body flew back and hit the ground with a thud. The gate had opened fully. The circle of energy now showed something on the other side. A river, a valley, green trees, sky. Freedom. The girl screamed his name, not a word, a sound, his name in her voice. Riker stood and limped toward her. Blood dripped from his forehead. Together they moved to the gate. The last two enemies blocked their path. Riker growled and tackled one. The girl flipped over the second, snatching her blade mid-air. She landed behind the enemy and drove the blade through its back. Riker crushed the mask of the last attacker with his elbow. The gate pulsed. They had seconds. The girl grabbed his hand. He nodded. They jumped through together. Light swallowed them. Heat vanished. The air changed. Cold. Clean. The raft appeared beneath them, now on a wide, calm river. They floated gently between trees that reached for the sky. The swamp was gone. Riker lay back, breathing deep. The girl leaned beside him, eyes closed. A small smile touched her lips. They had escaped the fire caves. They had made it through the last gate, but Riker knew one thing. This was not the end of the journey. Only a new beginning. The river was calm now, unlike anything they had seen before. Clear skies stretched above, and bright green trees swayed gently on both sides. Riker sat in the raft, his hands resting in his lap. The girl sat across from him, legs folded, her eyes focused on the shore. It felt peaceful, but Riker didn't trust it. Nothing on this planet had ever stayed quiet for long. He checked the weapon at his side, the knife on his belt, and the cracked map device still clipped to his vest. The girl tapped his arm and pointed ahead. A wide stone bridge arched across the river. Moss grew thick on its sides. Hanging vines draped from its supports. But Riker saw the scorch marks along its edge. This place had once seen fire. They paddled slowly toward it. The raft scraped against the shallow riverbed as they neared the shore. Riker stepped out first, testing the ground. It held. He helped the girl down, careful not to press her healing ankle. The air smelled different here. Not swamp, not steam, not rot. It smelled of rain and old wood. Birds chirped above them, real birds. Riker hadn't heard their sound since he arrived on Maresha 9. They crossed the bridge together. Halfway across, the girl stopped. She turned to the west, toward a thick grove of trees. Her face tightened. Riker followed her gaze. At first, he saw nothing. Then he spotted it, smoke, thin, black rising from behind the trees. He crouched low, grabbed his scope, and scanned the distance. A camp, 2 transport ships, and soldiers in rust armor. The girl crouched beside him. Her hand formed the symbol. In the dirt. A circle with a line slashing through it. Danger. Then she drew another shape. A structure, a dome. Then an X across it. They're burning something, Riker said softly. Or someone. The girl nodded. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. Riker touched her shoulder gently. She looked at him. Her eyes were clear, but filled with pain. He pointed to the camp, then to himself. I'll go. She grabbed his wrist, shook her head, then drew a path in the dirt around the camp, through a stream, into a cave. She knew another way. Safer, quieter, and from her expression, Riker understood something more. That dome wasn't just a place. It meant something to her. Maybe it had been her home. They followed the new path, weaving through narrow woods and rocky slopes. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched long. But they didn't stop. Finally, they reached the cave. It was wide, dark, and damp. Inside, the walls shimmered with crystals. Riker lit a flare. The light bounced across the rock like fire caught in glass. The girl moved ahead, sure-footed. This place was familiar to her. She touched markings on the wall. Symbols, names, Riker. Didn't understand, but he stood in silence as she placed her fingers over each one. They reached the end of the cave. A hole in the wall opened onto a ledge above the camp. From here, they could see everything. Fires crackled around the dome. Soldiers marched in circles. A prisoner knelt near the edge. The girl gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Riker looked. Through the scope. The prisoner was old, with glowing skin faded by age. Her face was marked with the same blue pattern as the girl's. Your mother, Riker said without needing her to confirm. The girl nodded, her body trembling. She turned to him, eyes pleading. He didn't wait. He checked his gear. One flare. One knife. One chance. He handed her the flare and made a motion. Wait for the light, he said. Then he slid down the slope into the trees. Riker moved like a shadow. Years of training kicked in. He stayed low, avoided branches, stepped over dry leaves. When he reached the back of the camp, he crept under a broken fence. The guards were careless. They thought no one would reach this far. He slipped behind tents, under metal beams, past cooking fires. At the edge of the dome, he found her. The woman was chained. Her eyes opened when he touched her wrist. She didn't speak. She only looked past him, toward the cliff where her daughter waited. Riker picked the lock, lifted her gently, and carried her into the shadows. A soldier spotted them and shouted. The alarm rang. Riker sprinted. He ducked behind a wall and lit the flare. He held it high toward the cave. The red light burned bright against the dark. From above, the girl screamed. It was not a sound of fear. It was a war cry. She launched herself down the slope with a speed that shocked the guards. Her blade flashed. Riker carried the older woman to safety. The girl fought like a storm. Every strike was sharp. Every movement clean. The guards fell back. She didn't stop. Riker turned once. She was standing over the last guard, chest heaving, eyes burning with rage and pain. Then she looked at him. Just one look. Then she nodded. The stars were coming out when they finally stopped moving. Riker helped the girl and her mother climb a small ridge that overlooked the valley. Below, the burning camp was just a line of orange light behind the trees. The older woman sat down. Slowly, her hands resting in her lap. She was weak but alive. The girl knelt beside her, wrapping a thin blanket around her shoulders. They said nothing for a while. Words were not needed. Riker stood nearby, watching the horizon. He felt the Weight in his chest slowly lift. For the first time since landing on this planet, he didn't feel like prey. He felt like someone who had fought back and won. The girl walked to his side and handed him a carved piece of bark. Shapes were etched into its surface: a river, a mountain, a small symbol marked near the top. She pointed at it, then to herself. Then to Riker. He understood. A hidden place. A village. Maybe the last safe one. If they reached it, they could rest, regroup, maybe even call for help. If help still existed. The girl's mother tapped her daughter's hand gently. She spoke. 3 soft words in their language. The girl nodded, then looked at Riker and smiled. A real smile. The kind that comes after pain, not before it. They packed quietly. Riker helped the older woman walk. The girl scouted the path ahead, her knife drawn. She moved with grace, but her eyes never stopped scanning the shadows. They walked for hours. The swamp was gone now, replaced by high trees and dry earth. The air was cooler. The moonlight lit their path. Strange birds sang from the canopy above. Once, they stopped to rest under a wide tree. Riker handed the girl a protein bar. She examined the wrapper, sniffed it, then bit into it carefully. Her eyes widened. She handed it to her mother, who laughed. Softly, Riker sat beside them. He felt something in that moment. Not victory, not peace. Something warmer, a connection. Something he hadn't felt since before the war. Suddenly, a low hum buzzed in the air. Riker's body tensed. He knew that. Sound. A scanner, fast-moving, searching. He pulled the girl behind a rock and helped the mother lie flat against the ground. The drone appeared above the trees. Silver, sleek, silent, except for the hum. A red beam swept across the forest floor. Riker pressed his body flat and stayed still. So did the girl. So did her mother. The beam passed once, twice, and vanished. The drone rose and disappeared into the clouds. The forest was silent again. Riker exhaled slowly. The girl looked at him, eyes wide. He nodded. They had avoided it. They moved quickly. After that, no more rests, no more talking. Just steady movement through the trees. When the sun finally rose, they reached a cliff edge. Below, in the distance, nestled between 2 hills, was a village. Small huts with round roofs. Glowing lights strung between poles. Smoke rising from chimneys. It looked untouched by war. The girl gasped. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned to Riker and grabbed his hand. He nodded. They had found it. Whatever. Home meant here. This was it. They climbed down slowly, helping one another across steep stones and slippery roots. The girl led them through a narrow pass between the hills. Birds flew overhead. A bell rang faintly from the village. 2 tall guards stood at the edge of the path. Their armor was smooth and marked with silver lines. They raised their weapons, but did not fire. The girl stepped forward and raised both hands. One of the guards recognized her. He lowered his weapon and spoke her name. The other looked at Riker and pointed his weapon again. Riker didn't move. The girl turned quickly and said something sharp. The guard lowered his aim slowly, then looked away. Riker understood. He was not welcome here. Not yet, but the girl took his hand and pulled him forward. The guards stepped aside. Together, they entered the village. People gathered around them. Children stared. Elders whispered. No one touched him. But no one stopped her. The girl led Riker and her mother to a small hut near the center. Inside it was simple. Blankets, bowls, herbs hanging from the roof. The girl helped her mother lie down on the bedding. Then she turned to Riker and reached up to touch his face. Her fingers brushed the scar on his jaw. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. It was not a kiss, not a goodbye. It was something older, deeper, a promise made without words. Riker closed his eyes. He had come to this planet as a soldier. Now he stood in a home he did not know, beside a girl who had saved him more than once. He didn't know what came next. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. The village woke slowly with the sun. Gentle bells chimed in the wind. Smoke curled from the cook fires. Children ran between the huts, chasing one another with laughter that echoed through the trees. Riker sat near the doorway of the hut, sharpening his knife on a flat stone. The girl sat beside him, braiding thin threads of glowing moss into her hair. Her mother rested inside, her breathing steady now. No one had spoken to Riker directly, but they didn't chase him away either. They watched him, measured him, judged him, and they let him stay. That was enough. The girl stood and motioned for him to follow. He rose and stepped into the morning light. She led him through the village, past woven bridges and stone steps carved into the cliffs. At the highest point, she stopped. Below them, the forest spread wide and deep. Rivers sparkled in the sunlight. Far in the distance, smoke still rose. From the places where war hadn't stopped. The girl pointed toward those distant clouds. She held up her palm, drew a circle with 2 lines crossing it, then pointed at the sky. Riker understood. War still burned. But this place was hidden, safe. For now, she reached into her satchel and pulled out a seed. Small, silver. She pressed it into Riker's hand and closed his fingers around it. He looked at her questioningly. She spoke a word. Nail. Then, placed her hand over his heart. Riker repeated the word. Nail. She smiled and nodded. It meant hope. They returned to the hut as the sun climbed higher. Her mother was sitting upright now, drinking a warm liquid from a carved bowl. She looked stronger. Her eyes followed Riker with less fear now. A knock sounded at the doorframe. One of the elders entered, tall, with hair braided down to his waist. He looked at the girl, then at Riker, then spoke softly to her. She listened, nodded, then turned to Riker and pointed outside. He followed her again. This time, they walked to a stone ring at the center of the village. The elders stood there, waiting. A fire burned at the center. The girl stepped forward and placed a flat disc into the fire. Riker noticed the carvings on its surface, his name, and hers, written in her people's script. The fire sparked once, then turned blue. An elder raised his hand and spoke words in a deep voice. Riker didn't understand them, but the moment felt like a ceremony. The girl took Riker's hand and held it high. The crowd around them cheered. Once, not loud, not wild, just a single powerful sound. A welcome. A beginning. Afterward, they returned to the hut. Her mother was standing now, watching from the entrance. She smiled faintly at Riker, then spoke one word. Stay. The girl looked at Riker, so did her mother. Both waited. Riker felt the weight of it, the choice. He could leave. Try to return to the broken world he came from, or stay here with them. In a place not built by war, but by healing. He nodded once, then said clearly, I will. The girl smiled, and for the first time, her eyes filled with tears. Not fear, not sorrow, relief. Time passed. Days turned into weeks. Riker helped rebuild old bridges, repaired tools, hunted game, and taught the children how to fish using nets. The people began to speak to him more. Some even laughed at his jokes. The girl stayed near him always. They shared meals, shared stories using gestures and drawings. She showed him where the healing plants grew. He taught her how to make a shelter using rope and tarp. Her mother grew strong again. She took her place among the village elders, offering wisdom and memory. She never questioned Riker's presence after that day. He had earned his place. One night, a sound echoed through the forest. A distant hum. A ship, old and low, passing far above the treetops. Riker stood and watched it fade. He knew what it meant. Others might come. Someday, the girl came to his side. She took his hand and pressed it to her chest. He looked into her eyes and nodded. Whatever came, they would face it together. In the heart of a world once full of danger, a soldier and a survivor had found something more than escape. They had found each other, and they had found a reason to live.